I feel like you are most driven as a player by money. You want odds and ends and trinkets and bubbles.
Well, not
That's what it
just
sounds
money. I
like.
want the magic items.
Sure. Like whenever
I'm
you
not
talk
I'm
about
not gonna
fear,
sell them.
your favorite bit is I want to pick up whatever they're holding and keep it. Like that's why
All right.
fear is such a big selling point to you.
Not because I want the stuff, it's because I want them to not have the stuff. Hello, friends. Robert Bevan here, author of the Caverns Creatures series of comedy, fantasy novels, and short stories. With me is Sam West, and today we're breaking down our picks for the top 5 and one worst. Level 1, Sorcerer Spells.
Oh yeah.
Yay.
We're doing it. Last big spell list. Sorcerers, they're basically wizards, but with less.
I think
So
it's the
you could.
last spell list at all, unless we
Oh,
do like,
nice.
you know, arcane trickster spells, but I don't,
Which,
yeah,
if you
maybe.
want,
Short
if you
video.
listen, if you want Arcane Trickster and uh Eldritch Knight, you can just reference our wizard video. That'll be functionally the same. Because it's that list.
Yeah, well, you know what else is essentially our wizard list? This
This one,
series. Yeah,
yeah, almost
this
identical in fact.
I'm gonna I'll tell you right now, this is probably the most boring selection I've ever had to do because I mean it's I just took 5 responsible spells and like one terrible one.
Yeah, I think I'm in exactly the same position where I'm like, wow, these are all really generically powerful. Great.
Yeah, and then
There's
yeah, I
like
mean I wanted to pick something interesting, but it's like, man, I'm doing my viewers a disservice by not just choosing the objectively best spells. And there are other good ones that I feel bad not including. But man, I think this is going to be different from my wizard list only because I've learned since then.
oh nice. Learning has occurred since the first spell list we ever did together.
Yes,
I'm so glad to hear it. There are spells that I wish I would talk about here. Like I don't think we're gonna cover Tasha's Caustic Brew, but I would like to talk about Tasha's Caustic Brew just because it's a neat little
feel
damage
free.
effect. But
I
um
mean, you're welcome to, or we'll do a video on it
sure.
eventually. Yeah,
Eventually, that's also true. But like, it's a neat little effect. I also think a lot of these are going to be kind of interchangeable. So while we're probably going to talk about like one spell within a specific category is how we tend to end up with these. A lot of them are pretty close. Like we'll touch on a case by case basis as to like should you have this or that. We'll get into it when we get into it. But you do only know like two spells, so having the spells you pick be bangers matters a lot. Having them be generally good spells in a lot of situations matters a lot. So be prepared to cast whatever spells you take a lot, and ideally interwork them with good meta magic in the upper or the mid tiers, and that's kind of like sorcerer's thing. I don't know.
all right. I guess I'll kick this one off. Let me refer to my list. All right, first up I have, and caveat, these are not in order because they're just all really good. Sam usually puts his in order. We'll see. First on my list is absorb elements.
I don't have absorb elements because I've got two others that do the same thing.
All right, that's yeah, I mean absorb elements. It's yeah, maybe not as good as when you get it as it is later on down the line where it's cheaper and the its effects are a lot more substantial.
Mhm.
But still, banger of a spell.
Yeah, I think you can put absorb elements on your character sheet and be very happy with it. I do think this is the rare instance where it is notably a lot worse than its competition because its competition, well, they're really busted, A, and B, they're usable in functionally every encounter, and absorb elements isn't usable in every
Yes.
encounter. So again, with that limited spell list, you really don't have it. Like, even if you get to the upper tiers, you just might not have room. You might go,
Yeah.
I get one new spell this level. I want another fourth level spell because I got one. So I guess I'm taking a fourth level spell and don't really have time to pick up absorb elements. If you ever do, though, it is definitely worth picking up and it will be valuable in your character sheet, especially in the upper tiers. But
Yes. All right. Well,
yeah.
what do you got?
All right. I will go to my number one immediately because it compares directly to this one. I think Silvery Barbs is the best sorcerer cantrip you can take. I think it is really, really busted, really flexible. You're going to use it in a lot of encounters. I really think if you're playing a sorcerer, you want to find room for this. If it's
I
not like one of your starting ones, it should be learned quickly because it's bananas how stupidly strong the spell is.
It made my list. I had the opportunity to use it once in recent gameplay. It failed, and I got the crap kicked out of me. But that's
Really?
bad rolling on my part. Yeah. I mean, that can happen
That's true.
to
It
me.
is just advantage and disadvantage.
Yeah,
Most of
but
the time, the impact of the spell is very high. A lot of the
mm,
time, especially when you've got buckets of first level spells lying around. Oh boy. Like 6th level, 7th level characters with silvery barbs in the character sheet, they just stick all their first level spells into silvery barbs the majority of the time. And that is just every encounter from there on out, especially if you're doing 1 or 2 big encounters per long rest, are wildly warped by this thing. It's such a powerful effect. I know many tables ban it, so talk to your DM before taking it. But it is definitely worth it if you can get under your sheet, even if your ones of experience like Bob has may not be winners.
no, yeah, I definitely still recognize its power. Like, wow, if this had worked, that really would have warped that encounter.
On
And
either front, right? If it
yes,
made you hit or them miss.
yes,
And it did neither somehow. Bummer.
yeah, them's the breaks.
Mm.
All right, what else do I have? I guess this one's kind of comparable as well. I've got Shield.
Yes. This one I think is different, but still very useful. I think it's my number 2. I think you want it or silvery barbs on your sheet. I don't think you want both. And I think more characters are going to regularly be able to put silvery barbs on their sheet. That being said, Shield is still obnoxiously powerful in that it gives you +5 AC when you need +5 AC. There'll be a lot of builds that want that. There'll be a lot of builds using medium armor or light armor or mage armor, and just suddenly their AC goes to 20 something. And you're like, yeah, I guess I just don't get hit this round for a single first level spell as my reaction. That's nuts.
Mm.
It's
Yeah, not a
very, very
whole lot else to say about it. Just, I mean, or my other favorite part of it is that it's a +5 AC for the round, not
Mhm.
a particular attack.
Yes.
So that
It also
is going to come
the
into play.
sheer the raw power of having something on your sheet where you don't have to prepare to use it and you can just pull it out when you need it, no questions asked, is
Mm.
very powerful. Some defensive spells like Shield of Faith, for example, gives you a flat +2 AC. It is cheap and efficient, and you use it when you need it, but sometimes you don't need it at all, and you'll go through an encounter and you'll have someone have a Shield of Faith on, and they'll benefit. Like the difference in AC makeup may not ever end up mattering in that fight.
Right.
With Shield, in this moment it can matter, and that makes it immediately beneficial. So you have a very hard time wasting the ability because a DC
Yeah.
shift of 5, like or an AC shift of 5, will usually turn misses to hits on characters with moderately high AC. So like especially in the mid tiers, which is where that's going to shine. Notably, I
All
will
right.
point this out. These 2
Yes.
top spells are for sorcerers above 3rd level, to be honest. Like I think that these 2 will shine better individually in the mid tiers, in the upper tiers, whenever you got 4 first level spell slots that you're happy to bang. Out the gate, you may not want to start with either of these. You may want to take 3 other first level spells that have proactive effects, just so you can have a high impact on your level 1 or 2 fights. Because these don't necessarily have that high of an impact on level 1 and 2 fights. They're much more useful as cheap resources that you want to have on your sheet in the mid upper tiers.
All right. Well, do you have something more impactful?
I do. And this one is specifically useful because sorcerers have a really funny interaction with it. It's Ice Knife is my number 3.
Oh, all right. Do
Are you
tell.
not? Did you not read my sorcerer picks? Ugh, my cold damage spells even touched on it. Ice
I
Knife
have read them,
is that's fair.
not in
Ice Knife,
preparation for this particular video.
that's fair. That's fair. You can't read all my stuff all the time. This spell has a really fun interaction. So
I feel like I do.
usually it usually boils down to be a ranged version of Burning Hands. It hits similar enough area. It does about the same damage. It does slightly less to things around it, slightly more to the individual target, usually. But where it becomes particularly gross is sorcerers get meta magic, and meta magic is going to shape all of these spell lists from here on out. And the reaction spells aren't really affected by meta magic, but Ice Knife sure is. And Ice Knife, most importantly, makes a single attack roll against only ever one target, but it hits multiple things, which means you can twin it and get double damage on multiple things, which is really gross. Twinning an Ice Knife will all of a sudden you'll just throw 2 Ice Knives at 2 different targets that are within 5 feet of each other, and there's just a giant cold explosion for a first level spell slot and some meta or some sorcery points. It's
Okay.
real good.
I do remember this now.
Mm-hmm.
That should have made my list. Probably more than my next pick. I picked Magic Missile. Good old standby. Bang, bang.
one thing it really has going for it is that it can't miss and it will
Yep.
always do damage. So if we're looking for consistency of a spell you can always use on a list that has very few spells known, this counts. Definitely counts. The spell
Yeah,
does do something big and powerful.
those were my
Big
thoughts
and powerful.
picking it. Does it does Magic Missile have any meta magic stuff going on?
Useful ones? No.
Potential? No, useful? No. All right. It's just
Yeah. Sorcerer Meta Magic ends up being harder to use than you'd expect on a lot of options. But Magic Missile being, I think, one of like the prime examples of, oh, this just doesn't work with most of the things. It can work
right.
with distance spell if you need to have a longer range. It can't work with Empower spell to my knowledge. Oh, that's not true. You could re-roll the D4s, I think. When you roll damage for a spell, you can spend a sorcery point and re-roll the number of damage dice up to your charisma modifier, but you roll one damage dice when you roll this. It just hits 3 targets or one target 3 times.
Yeah.
So you could re-roll the D4 if you really wanted to empower spell it. That doesn't seem great, to be honest with
No.
you. Yeah. It's not amazing with meta magic, but it is a useful little fine damaging first level spell that did not make my list because I think it's incredibly replaceable with Ice Knife, incredibly replaceable with Burning Hands. You can take Chromatic Orb
Yeah,
over it and not be that upset.
I'd consider taking Ice Knife over it because of your fun little trick there.
Mm.
But well, Magic Missile always hits, does some damage. It's got versatility. You can focus fire, or you can spread out the the little missiles. And yeah, to do that, I mean, you can save your sorcery points for something else.
This is true. It's a perfectly reasonable option to take. I think plenty of people will put on their sheet and be very happy with it. Again, I put it like just barely below Ice Knife and how good I think it probably plays, just because Ice Knife has the fun synergy upgrades.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got my top three, Silvery Barb's Shield and Ice Knife. This is the territory where we get a little bit iffier because they tend to be a little bit more narrow. You normally will want like a damaging spell. Again, Tasha's Caustic Brew, I think I could also talk about alongside like Ice Knife, Magic Missile, Burning Hands. Those kind of fit into the category of I can do damage with my first level spell, ideally in an area, because that's usually more useful than hitting single targets. You got your defensive spell with Silvery Barbs of Shield. Now what? And that's normally we're going to get the utility stuff. I think
Yes.
my utility pick, at least the first one I want to talk about, is Disguise Self, which is awkward to put here, but I do think because it's got a long duration, it might be worth considering as your number 4.
Yeah, I'd consider Disguise Self just because I think it's fun. Um, that was the end of my thought process. I ended up going with something that I thought was more responsible.
Mm.
But yeah, go ahead. What
I can't wait to
why'd
touch
you
on
pick?
why I think your responsible pick is irresponsible. So Disguise Self is it's just a great utility tool. It is a low tier way before invisibility comes online. You swap this out in the mid tiers once you're done using the charlatan kind of nature of it. You get a way to present as whatever you want. It's a way to navigate socially. It's a way to even do some dungeon crawling with it. You can look like one of the natives, the goblins, the kobolds, and their warren, whatever you want. Disguise Self can sort of help you meld in there. It's a low tier spell I find really easy to use, and I like that if I'm playing a sorcerer, I want spells that are easy to use because I only get a couple of them. I
Yeah.
do think you can find enough instances where Disguise Self will fit that bill. And again, because it has a long duration, you can kind of get a lot out of it for its cast, doesn't even break concentration. All that little upside, I think, makes it worth mentioning here. Is it like physically technically going to be the best of this entire list in its given situations? Probably not, but I do think it's probably slightly more useful on you can cast it more often, I think, than a charm person. You can cast it more often, I think, and get something out of it than something like comprehend language. That's not a high bar, but
Yeah, certainly.
that's my thought process.
Yeah, that's fine, and it is fun to use. I'm curious though. This is still. I mean, it's not wizard list long, but it's still a pretty long list with a lot of good spells. I want to know, what did you think my responsible pick is?
Detect magic.
Yeah, it is. Okay.
Here's the issue. Sorcerers don't get ritual casting.
Oh, yeah.
Fun fact. I just looked that up right before this because I was like, they have to be ritual casters, right? I have to include detect magic. They sure don't get ritual casting. Which I find a little bit baffling. They probably do in the next edition, which is being pushed back from, release. So we may never get those books because they're firing a bunch of people. But, as it currently stands, if you are a sorcerer and don't take ritual caster, you cannot cast detect magic without spending a spell slot. And I don't love having to spend a spell slot on that kind of effect. Normally it's like the last spell I stick in my wizard spellbook that I can just kind of do for free. It's like a passive boon. Anything that gets ritual casting can kind of like do it as a passive boon. Sorcerers have to spend the resources on it. Sorcerers don't have a lot of room on their sheet. So like it makes this something that I'm pretty quick to want to cut. I still think you can probably take it and not have that bad of a time, though it does give you a good amount of like situations and circumstances where you'll have an information gathering tool that your party wants.
Yeah, I mean, the detects magical creatures. If that comes up, you got a way to deal with it.
It
You
doesn't
got a
detect
big.
Rakshasa, fun fact,
Why not?
because they're immune to all magic below 8th or 6th level or
No.
something.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just a
This,
neat little thing. I'm reading up
this
on
is something
Rakshasa
you
currently.
learned doing research. Yes, good. Um. All right. Well, that's one niche case where it won't work.
Yeah, but
But
usually you'll find illusion magic, you'll find invisible creatures, you'll find magical traps. It detects a lot of little useful things, magic items that are hidden places. A lot of times this will be like, hey, that's different, that's weird. We didn't notice that. Let's go investigate it. And
yeah,
it's kind
not
of a
just
useful tip
hidden
before.
places, but you've got a big fight. You pile all the loot together, detect magic. I want that innocuous looking dagger.
Sure. As a way to just go through and check everything quickly to see if it's magical. Why not?
Yeah.
I feel like you are most driven as a player by money. You want odds and ends and trinkets and bubbles.
Well, not
That's what it
just
sounds
money. I
like.
want the magic items.
Sure. Like whenever you talk
I'm
about
not going to
fear,
sell them.
your favorite bit is I want to pick up whatever they're holding and keep it. Like that's why
All right.
fear is such a big selling point to you.
Not because I want the stuff, it's because I want them to not have the stuff.
That's
That's what
kind of
they were trying to stab me with.
the I'm choosing to envision this as like the reason that you want the stuff at the end of the adventure is so that the creatures that you murdered to get there don't have that stuff anymore and now it's your stuff. That's kind of how I view
Well, I
you as
mean
a player.
I feel good about that. I feel smug, but no, like fear. There's so many layers. Like,
Sure.
it works on some, not on others. They drop their stuff. I grab their stuff. I deal with the ones that pass their saves. Then the other guys come back and they're unarmed, and that's hilarious to me. And I deal with them much easier.
I take responsibility for this tangent because we have gone off the rails from talking about first level
Yes.
sorcerer spells.
Okay, yes. We'll get to fear again.
Again, we've gotten to fear so many times.
All right. That was my 5.
No, you got Disguise Magic done already? Okay, I've got Silvery Barb's Shield, Ice Knife, Disguise Self, and my number 5, my last Sorcerer first level spell I think is probably worth taking. This is a tough pick. There are a lot of options, and I want this to be utility based, so I think I'm going to go with Featherfall, which is odd,
I can believe
but
that. Yeah.
useful.
Yeah.
It's another one of those spells where you'll stick it on your character sheet for the entire campaign, and it will have value at almost every tier you're in. It is hard to get it there, but because you don't have virtual casting anyway and you want like a reactive defensive spell, this can be that as far as like falling off of places, obviously. But it's also kind of a mode of transit spell. It's a way to get down from high places without fear of damage. Everyone can just yeet themselves off the top of the mountain and not take any fall damage. People can just jump off the blimp. They can jump off the top of the tower, whatever you need to do. It gets you to the ground instantaneously using the feather fall mechanics. All of that plays into it being a particularly useful little tool to have in your belt. When you get it, I don't exactly know. I think really I would take these 3 of the ones that I mentioned already. This might be the 4th I pick up at level 2, and then moving into level. I'm sorry, you start only knowing 2 spells. I'd pick 2 of the top 4, and then the 3rd one I'd get would probably still not be Featherfall, but it'd be a consideration over Disguise Self.
Yeah.
And then I level 4, you're never taking these ever again because you're learning 2nd level spells. So,
Yeah.
it's a tight list.
Yeah. Anything else? Any contenders, runners up? It is a big list. You want
Most
to
of
talk
them
about
kind
Tasha's
of
called Caustic Brew?
I mean, that overlaps with Ice Knife, right? I think that they're like categories. You got your defensive reaction spell, which is like your Silver Barbs, Silver Element Shield. You have your utility spells, so like out of combat exploration stuff like Fog Cloud, Disguise Self, Jump to some degree. I think the ones that we haven't talked about are, I think, less. They're going to come up less often than the other ones. I think Charm Person's kind of in this boat. It's still powerful. You still might want it. Silent Image is also kind of in this boat. All of these effects you can build into a sorcerer, and you can try and find the synergies that happen with meta magic. It's just really tough because you only get 2. So like you have to make sure one of the ones you pick you can use. And that's gonna narrow you to often to like wanting the best. It's hard to try things out as sorcerer because you're so limited in your options. It makes
Mm.
me more inclined to be like, you probably should stick with the winners. One we haven't touched on is Mage Armor. I have a really hard time not having mage armor, or at least a way to get a decent AC on these kinds of characters. But usually I'm gonna forgo it for like 3 levels until I don't want another 3rd level spell, or I don't want another 2nd level spell, so I'll finally stick mage armor on my sheet. I try and find it through like other avenues if I can, like a feat or some other method of getting this kind of bonus to my AC, because I just don't want to have to spend one of my 2 known spells on it. But it is worth it for a lot of characters, especially if you don't have a species that gives you armor proficiency or up to multi-classing armor proficiency that way. So, like, I don't know. There are lots of spells here. I think our lists are ones that you will always be able to cast at least, and that's why they're notable.
Yeah, I considered mage armor as well. But ultimately did not make my list. I had a hard time finding a worst until
Did you?
until I found it. It's like,
Oh,
oh
did
yeah,
you?
yeah, that one. Yeah,
There's 2 I think that stand out pretty badly, but you can talk about the one that I know you hate more first. Go
yeah.
for it.
All right. First, I'll give you my list. I had absorb elements, shield, silvery barbs, magic missile, and detect magic. And for the worst, I chose, no surprise here, distort value.
This sure isn't a spell. This is haggling with
Yes.
extra steps. This is a way to make that extra 2.5 copper savings really waste everyone's time. Like, oh my god, this spell is so bad. It's got a cast time of a minute. You can't even like pull
Oh.
a literal fast one. You have to like hide in the corner and like get other people to distract them while you use magic to scuff it up, as opposed to just mundanely scuffing it up. I don't. Oh, this spell is horrendous.
I'll get the best price on turnips.
We definitely
Oh,
talked about this spell at length for being just the hottest of hot trash, and it deserves every second we've talked about it. Doubling an object's value or having its value is not worth any amount of time. Haggling and like shopkeeping stuff is some of the most mundane, awful Dungeons and Dragons play I ever have to sit through. I hate it so much. I tend to give like, if I'm doing merchants, they're traveling merchants that have cool magic items on them. In my party, how I tend to do gold is I give them enough to buy like 3 or 4 of the 10 listed magic items. Then they get to kind of decide which ones they want as they're going. Usually how I do magic
yeah.
items. If they want any mundane items, tell me, and they will have either purchased them or start the game with them, because I sure don't want to sit through. I go to the local shopkeep. His name is Timothy, and he is behind the counter. He's got a loving wife and children at home, and you're going to try and scam him out of 6 silver pieces, huh? Glad this is what
Uh,
we're spending our time on.
yeah. I mean, in theory, this could scale, but it's not going to.
You don't ever want to put this on your character sheet. Not ever.
No. All right. You said there are 2. Is this one the one you chose, or did you
No,
choose the other one?
I
Okay.
choose the other one.
What's the other
I
one?
think Witch Bolt offends the senses. I think Witch Bolt is
All right. Yeah,
horrendous.
I looked at it. It's not worst. It's boring, but it does something.
Barely.
Yes.
It barely constitutes doing anything. It is a cantrip damage that you could opt to spend your action on doing a cantrip's worth of damage that your opponent can end whenever they'd like. You're wasting spell slots on this. You are overpaying for a d12 damage. It is awful. It takes your concentration. This thing is horrendous. It's terrible. It is a 1 out of 5. It does do something, though. It's still not doing anything worth it. It's still not doing anything that you should be spending spell slots on, especially when we got 2 spell slots. It is still probably better than Absorb Value in like
Yeah.
a vacuum.
I mean, speaking of in a vacuum, all right, Witch Bolt. Now you say your enemy can stop at any time they want. You're talking about taking full cover, right?
Moving
Or
out of
what
30 feet of you,
out of 30
hitting
feet?
you so your concentration ends.
All right, yeah, yeah, yeah. But now say they can't move. You're faster than they are. They can't get within, beyond 30 feet of you, and you're chasing them with your Witch Bolt. You can move with this, right?
Yes.
What's the
You're not dashing,
limitations?
though, because your action has to be spent maintaining this. So you
Right.
have to be able to outspeed them while they're dashing, while you're not.
All right, so you do have to spend your action maintaining this.
Yes, you make a ranged spell attack with this. On hit, you're the what you get for hitting with a 1st level spell slot is 1d12 damage.
Right.
Then every turn after that, you can spend your your entire action, your whole action, doing that again.
That's
It does auto hit, but still.
yeah. All right. I'm not going to try and argue in Witch Bolt's favor, except to say that it's better than Distort Value, and you've conceded that.
Yeah, I will give you that. Distort Value has no place in the game. Witch Bolt is just the worst at its job by a lot. Like, to the point of not being a valuable spell that you should ever consider. And I consider this actively doing nothing worth the 1 out of 5 rating. Utter trash.
Oh yeah. All right. I'm with you there. All right. Well, that was our list. That was level 1 Sorcerer Spells. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Let us know what you think down in the comments. What are your picks? What did you think of our picks? Let us know, and like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.